Reachin Teachin podcast. I'm Greg. We have a special guest today.
Howdy, everybody. I am Isaac Espinosa of CEI Esports, fellow fighting game enthusiast and also esports coordinator as well. How you doing?
Today we are talking about controllers. So Isaac, you were teaching the other day, and I was watching you teach, and you had an amazing discussion with the children, and you brought up the Nintendo 64 controller.
Correct.
So why don't you tell everybody what transcended what you said and how that little thing happened?
Oh, of course. So the lesson, for those that require context, the lesson is basically talking about the evolution of gaming, where we talk about how games have progressed over the years and, more importantly, the hardware and how it's continued to evolve over time. One of the discussions is that we talk about video game controllers. We started with the Atari 2600 and how it's very simple, has one button, one joystick, and then we moved right on to the N64 controller, and I proceeded to slander the N64 controller with no hesitation, because I personally believe that the N64 controller is the worst controller that Nintendo has made. And I have many reasons why, but I can imagine you clearly are against that idea.
I have a little bit of a rebuttal. I think for me personally, because the Nintendo 64 is one of the first systems that I had, I have such a love for it. I have such a strong connection with that controller. And also, it's just one of the first controllers that has the analog stick. So, I'm not saying it's the greatest controller of all time by any means. I understand it's weird. It's funky looking. It's not everybody's cup of tea. But I got to master it. I played with the controller. I had nothing but that controller at one point in my life. So, for me, I had to get over it. I had to understand how to use it. I had to go from holding the controller like this to having to hold the middle part depending on what game I was playing. Because you can move on certain games with the analog stick, and on certain other games you had to use the up, down, left, right. So that's just my opinion on the controller. But I'd like to ask you, what was one of your first systems, and how do you feel about that controller?
Well, my first ever system was the GameCube. The GameCube, I think, is one of Nintendo's best consoles. One of its most underrated, because it came at a point where Nintendo was first going into handheld gaming. So that was their more popular expertise at the moment, because they had the Nintendo DS. Nintendo Game Boy was still going strong, even though it had been going on for almost a decade up until that point. But the controller for the GameCube controller, definitely one of the best Nintendo's made. It's accessible, it's easy to understand because of its color coordination, and more importantly, the buttons are all used. And that's my problem with the N64 controller. That's one of my many problems. It depends on the game, of course.
Absolutely.
But why is it that I'm not using all of my buttons? Why is it that certain games use the joystick and some use the D-pad? It's just I don't understand. It's just like, use both. There are plenty of games on the GameCube that use both of those parts of the controller flawlessly. Not to mention, who in their bright mind decided to make C buttons? I think that the C buttons evolving into the C stick was the natural evolution of the right trigger. But come on! Who made C buttons? You can't even do a diagonal input with C buttons.
How do you feel about the fact that some controllers have a D-pad and some controllers have an analog, and some controllers have all of them? Some controllers have a D-pad, analog, and another analog. So
it's the natural progression of controllers, because obviously with games like Super Mario on the NES or other games on the SNES, the natural choice was a D-pad, because at that point there was no need for any other movement because it was so linear. But then as games went on, as games got more complicated, the use of both the analog and the D-pad were much more common. And that helps a lot, because not only does it give you more movement options, but it also allows for the controller to be at its utmost use.
Yeah.
Not to mention the fact that I think that if you're going to have a controller with both of them, you should be able to use both of them. Some use one and some don't use either of them for some reason.
Do you feel that it's because the games that you play specifically are using all of the parts of the controllers? Because from my experience, some games used, for example, on the Nintendo 64,
Well, damn.
on the Nintendo 64, some games prioritized the analog stick and not so much the C buttons.
Right.
And some games prioritize the C buttons, but not really the analog stick. But some games prioritized everything. Everything did something. So do you feel, in comparison, do you feel the way you feel about the Nintendo 64 controller in comparison to the other options that they were? Or do you feel that way about the game specifically, depending on what you play? For example, if you were to play Mario Party, right, on 64, and not everything is utilized, is that your gripe with it?
Mario Party is actually a funny example because Mario Party, you do use both. There are so many games where you control the camera or control another movement option with the C buttons. Excuse me, I was about to say C stick. But the issue with me is the fact that why is it that I have to use either or? Why is it that I can't use both all the time? Not to mention the fact that why is it that it's such an awkward placement?
Ah.
Especially because, first of all, who in their bright mind thought that the best place for the analog stick was the middle of the controller? Why? Why would you put it such an awkward spot? Put it where the D-pad is. Put the D-pad in the middle of the controller where it belongs so that it's easier to access. With the C buttons, it's easy for that to be on the right. But the thing is that your left hand is not symmetrical with your right.
Right, when you're playing with the analog.
Correct.
Right, right. I feel you. We're on the same page when it comes to that. Even as a kid, my hands were so small, and I had to hold this controller, and the controller was just as awkward as it looks, and I just had to get over that. And then you start playing PlayStation, and you get a nice controller, and then you get into PlayStation 2, and it's the nice controller with two analog sticks. So, PlayStation, thank you.
Like I genuinely think, and I don't know if you could call this a hot take. I genuinely think that the Wii remote is a better experience controller wise than the N64 controller.
Interesting.
I think that the Wii is just a better controller experience, even when it's sideways, because there are. So for those that don't know what the Wii remote looks like, and you can put a picture of this if you find one, the Wii remote is simple, and a lot of games use the attachment of the nunchuck as the way to maybe use another part of the controller. That is much simpler and much less buttons to understand than the N64 controller, where again, why do you have multiple buttons for a direction? You usually have that for the D-pad, sure, but not the C-stick. The C-stick has no reason to have C buttons, and that's the thing I'm going to harp on the most. Oh, and let's also not forget to mention the fact that this is the one time I'm going to bring this up. Fun fact, for those that were unaware, Mario Party 1 and 2 had a lot of mini games where you would spin the control stick, sort of like you'd spin it with your hand like this. Did you know that Nintendo got into a lawsuit because of that? Where there were so many people that had cases of burning their palms because of that they needed to issue gloves.
That's what happened.
See, that's exactly where they went. Straight to the hospital. Because they burned their hands.
I did not know
spinning the games. And note, no other controller for Nintendo has had that problem. except the N64 controller.
Joel behind the camera when Isaac said that the Wii remote is a better experience than the Nintendo
It
64
is. It's a
remote.
better
He said that was
experience.
a hot take, and he said that was bold. And you know what? I'm on the fence about it, to be completely honest. When it comes to the Nintendo Wii remote, I don't know what it is about the Nintendo Wii. Yes, it was evolutionary, if you look at it or whatever, whatever. Oh man, I hated the Nintendo Wii. I hated everything about the
Most
Nintendo
people
Wii.
did.
I did not have fun with the Nintendo Wii. It's like you go to somebody's house and they have a really big TV with that remote that you have to point at, and you can't really get to really good get a good pointing at. That's the struggle that I had with the Nintendo Wii all my life.
Listen, man. Just because motion
I
control
every time I'm
sucks.
sorry, every time I go to my
Oh
fiance's
God.
house, her mom's house, and we gotta watch TV and put the Mets game on, we gotta use this weird controller, and it feels like we're playing Nintendo Wii because you gotta find it and you can't find it, and I'm like, what am I playing, Nintendo Wii here? What am I about to get into some Wii Sports?
Listen, whether or not they were good motion controls, I will always not defend this. Motion controls sucked, but a lot of the games on the Wii did not have to use motion controls.
What's your favorite game on the Nintendo Wii?
Super Paper Mario? Free.
I really enjoyed Paper Mario on 64. I had that game
Same.
as a kid. I had to use the analog stick in the middle for that one, but zoom into that eye roll, please. Whoever's editing that, zoom into that eye roll, please, and thank you. Woo! That was a nice one. But I'll tell you, my experience with Paper Mario in 64, oh man, it brings me back. Mario just floating down.
Listen, Paper Mario N64 is a good game. No, absolutely. And this is not to say, mind you, that the N64 is a bad console. I will never say that at all. N64 is easily one of the best Nintendo consoles that have come out not even in recent times, just in general. Like Paper Mario 64, Mario 64,
Yes.
Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, and
Oh
Mask,
my goodness.
Banjo Kazooie, Conker's Bad Fur Day. Conker's Bad
Conquer,
Fur Day.
whoa. I'm going to stop you right there. We can't talk about Conker's Bad for Day. But
If you know, you know.
if you know, you know. And I'm glad you brought that up because that's one of my favorite games of all time. But, we're not gonna go there. But let me ask you. A man of games,
Mm-hmm.
very respected from me
Of course.
because you have all the knowledge when it comes to the game. I asked you what your favorite game was, and off the top of your head, there it is. I love that. What is your favorite controller of all time?
It's a tough question. When it comes to like your favorite controller, you always think about the one that is always easy to go back to, no matter how long it's been, no matter how hard it is to really like go back to those games. The controller is never really the reason for that. It'd have to be like it's a tie between the GameCube controller and Nintendo Switch Pro controller. GameCube, it's iconic.
Yep.
It's classic.
Still used today.
Oh, of course. If you're someone that plays Super Smash Bros. Ultimate or even Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on the Switch, you're always going to be using the GameCube controller.
Yep.
Or even if you aren't using it yourself, you're always finding people that are using that controller because it's just so easy to use, so easy to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Like especially the color coordinated buttons. That was a really nice move on Nintendo since at the time having the buttons color coordinated like that was something that they took from the N64 controller and made it even better. But also, let's not forget the fact that the Pro controller for the Switch, while not color coordinated, is still really good. It's comfortable, it's nice, it's durable. That's the one thing. That's the one thing you always got to give Nintendo and their controllers. They make durable controllers.
Yes. Yes.
Those controllers are absolutely going to survive like five wall slams.
I have to say one of my favorite controllers of all time. It might have to be between PlayStation 2 and GameCube and Xbox 360.
Really?
Yes. I really enjoyed the Xbox 360 controller. I played a lot of Skate on Xbox 360, so I had to use the analog stick for literally everything. So I love the 360 controller. I still have them. I still use them. Um, you can't go wrong with a 360 controller, in my opinion. So shout out to the Xbox 360. You changed my life. I love you forever. I'm always thinking about you. And shout out to EA Skate because I can't wait for that game to come out too. But so, what is your opinion on the next gen controllers? How do you feel about the new generation of PlayStation and Xbox controllers?
I think that they're keeping the simplicity, which is good. Um, the important thing is that a lot of controllers nowadays, especially for Xbox, are simple. When it comes to a controller, you don't want it to be complicated. You don't want it to be something that someone looks at and they're like, hmm? They gotta do a double take. It's like every single controller that PlayStation has come out with has always stood on the same principle that the original PlayStation controller had, whilst also adding something relatively new in the mix to go with the new gen consoles. Like for example, DualShock had the touchpad
Yeah.
that brought you back to the PlayStation menu.
Mm-hmm.
That was something like really simple, and that was whilst it was something that didn't necessarily need to be there, it was still a welcome feature. So when it comes to these next gen consoles, the best thing that a lot of these companies need to understand is that simplicity is key, because no matter what the age is, people are going to be getting your consoles of varying ages from 5 to 10 to 20. So you're always going to need a controller that can do everything that it can needs to do, while it's also being accessible to everybody.
Interesting. I really like the PlayStation 5 controller.
It's really good.
I think the PlayStation 5 controller is comfortable. I think it's not too far off from the PlayStation 4 so that it's completely different. I had to get used to it maybe for the first week, but I love that the triggers go based off of what you're playing. So if you're playing a car game, it feels like you're pushing a pedal. If you're playing a shooting game, it feels like you're shooting and you're getting the resistance of actually shooting. Uh, I appreciate the PlayStation 5 controller. I haven't had too much experience with the new Xbox controller.
Is it any different?
I don't know if it's any different. And to be completely honest, I've seen both of them hit side by side. I don't see any difference.
So much like the Xbox consoles, just not much different.
I don't know. I don't want to say that the Xbox consoles are not worth it. That goes on opinion. But we are a household of PlayStations. So I'll leave it at that. So here's my question to you.
What's up?
I see a lot of pro gamers with different controllers they bring to tournaments. It all is based off of personal uh, choice, whatever you decide that you want to play with. And I see a lot of people come and they play with the classic style uh, joystick with the buttons, sort of like the arcade games. So, how do you feel about those type of joysticks? Are they something that you've played with? Do you see yourself playing, let's say, Super Smash with that? What's your opinion on that?
So it's funny you mention Super Smash Bros. And fighting games in general. A lot of what those are called are fight sticks in
Okay.
the FGC. The thing about fight sticks is that the main reason that people play with fight sticks is inputs. Obviously, you know your pretzel inputs, like the quarter circle forwards, and your obviously your Z inputs for dragon uppercuts or DPs. Uh, a lot of those are sort of not inconsistent, but some of those can be a little difficult on pad, which is like regular controllers. So a lot of people opt to use fight sticks because not only is it a much more comfortable feeling, but it's also a much easier and much more optimal and consistent way to input those particular inputs for a lot of people. However, there's also a certain couple people that are crazy and use only buttons on their fight sticks. So they're no joystick. Actually, That's the way that a lot of people use the Smashbox, which is a fight stick or button only controller for Smash. It's sort of like a fight stick, but it's obviously all buttons, and a lot of people use it to a lot of success because, especially for characters like Kazuya, in Smash Bros, Kazuya has an input called Electric Wind God Fist, taken straight from Tekken. It's a really powerful move, but it's of one frame input, which means that you only have like a little under a second to be able to input it perfectly. So having a fight stick means that not only can you consistently get that input faster, but you can also get it a consistent amount of times, which makes it a lot easier for people to get into that. However, this is the main reason why I don't use a fight stick or a smash box. It is really hard to get into. Trust me, when you're someone that requires the muscle memory of an actual controller, getting into a fight stick is really difficult. That's why a lot of people still use pad and controller to this day, even though a lot of people use fight stick for fighting games because it's just a comfortable feeling. And if you don't know how to use a fight stick and you're trying to go from a controller to a fight stick,
Interesting.
it's not
I've never
it's
used it.
really
I've
bad.
seen people use it. I respect it from a distance, but it's just not for me.
Yeah, no, same.
I feel like I appreciate arcade style gaming for arcade style games. If I see NBA Jam, I'm playing NBA Jam. If I see WWF WrestleMania or Royal Rumble on the arcade, I'm playing it and I'm having a great time.
It's another thing too. Some people want to harken back to that feeling of playing on a classic arcade fighting machine.
I think that's where I come in. If it's for a classic game, I'll play it, but I'm not gonna play Grand Theft Auto on a fight stick.
Fair. It's mainly for competitive games.
Right.
Thank God, because if you played Grand Theft Auto on a fight stick, or if you played Mario Odyssey on a fight stick, yeah, good luck. Good luck.
All right, so right now, before we end this off, I need your top 3 controllers. 1 being the best, 3 being like an honorable mention. Your top 3 right now.
We'll go from honorable mention to the best. So honorable mention is for me the that's actually a really good. That's a really hard choice. I would say that it would have to be the DualShock, the PlayStation 4 controller.
Okay.
It's really nice. It's really consistent, easy to use, and it's honestly it's one of the more iconic controllers right now, especially because the PlayStation 4 had been around for so long before the PlayStation 5. I'd have to say next would probably be the GameCube controller because the GameCube controller is just so iconic. It's classic. It's easy to use. I've already sung its praises multiple times in this podcast, and I'd say the last would have to be the Nintendo Switch Pro controller.
Okay.
It's such a good controller for the Switch, and it's infinitely better than Joy-Cons, without a shadow of a doubt. Before we end things off, though, I do have a question for you.
Please.
In your opinion, top 3 worst controllers.
Oh.
What are the controllers that if you had to go back
Woo!
to, if you had to use, you dread using? I'm already not expecting the N64 controller to be on there, so by all means.
Looking back at it now, I'm going to go with an honorable mention of the original Xbox controller. Very bulky. I didn't have that wireless, so it was very weird to have a wired controller that was that bulky, especially as a kid. After that is going to come, I'm going to say, damn, worst. This might be a little bit of a hot take, but the only reason I'm going to bring this up is because it wasn't perfected yet. I'm going to say the PlayStation 1 controller.
Really?
The only reason I'm going to say that controller is because there was no analog sticks on it. I was actually playing PlayStation 1 yesterday, and it felt really uncomfortable because moving, there was only the D-pad, and it was just a little weird. PlayStation 2 comes around with the analog sticks, infinitely better. So for that, that's going to be with number 2 and number 1. We're going to go with the Nintendo Wii. The Nintendo Wii is going to... There's another eye roll. Please zoom into that. Please. The Nintendo Wii is going to be number 1 for me.
It's not based at all, but please
I
continue.
love Wii Sports. I am a man of Wii Sports. Look me in my face when I say this. I am a Wii Sports man. I am a man of Wii Sports. I love Wii Sports. I grew up playing Wii Sports with my whole family.
He hates saying this, by the way.
I will say this proudly. But I cannot stand the Nintendo Wii controller. You have me one day playing with it like this. And then there's another game where I have to play with it like this. And then I have to attach a nunchuck and play with it like this. So for that, Nintendo Wii, I'm sorry.
This man ain't never had a peripheral on a controller before.
I can't stand.
Have you played Game Boy? Do you know how many peripherals there were for the Game Boy?
I have played Game Boy. I played Game Boy. I played PSP. I played Nintendo Switch. I did not play Wii U, so I have no experience there. I can't say anything about that. But I can tell you.
Come back to me when you got the double decker for the Nintendo Game Boy when they made it a Gundam. But thankfully, that's gonna wrap things up for today's Reachin and Teachin podcast. Thank y'all so much for watching. I have been Isaac Espinosa. This has been.
I can't stand the Nintendo. I can't stand the Nintendo Wii controller. My disdain for it runs very deep. This is the Reachin and Teachin podcast. You have Greg here.
Tune in for the next episode where we debate the Wii.
Oh. It's just going to be me sitting here telling you how much I hate the Nintendo Wii. Mario Odyssey, Mario, whatever.
Mario Odyssey was on the Switch, Jim.
No. So what was the Mario?
It's New Super Mario Bros. Wii.
There was one with a hat.
That was Mario Odyssey, and that was on the Switch.
You telling me Mario Odyssey was not on Nintendo Wii?
No,
Can we
yeah,
fact
Jim.
check that? He called me a Jim. Can we fact check that before we end this off? He called me a Jim.
Nah, watch, and be amazed. This man thought he played Mario Odyssey 10 years ago. By all means, we can extend this episode. This is an extended episode, by the way.
Just by a smidge. Only the Switch? So what was the Mario on Wii?
New Super Mario Bros. Wii, Super Paper Mario, not 3D. Galaxy.
Mario Galaxy. My
Oh,
apologies.
you're not about to tell me Mario Galaxy was trash.
I'm not going to say Mario Odyssey was Mario
To be
Galaxy
continued.
was trash. I'm not going to say that. But I am not playing a Mario game with the Wii controller. So that's why I can't really say much about Mario Galaxy. But what I can say is that if you thought I was going to play that game with that controller, I'm sorry, sir. We can end off right here, but I need you to know. This man does not like the Nintendo Wii controller.
Get a load of this guy.
Thank you.